So today we're going to tie nymphs, and we're going to start off with one of the simplest nymphs going. It's called a zebra midge. Is everybody pretty good at their whip finish?
They're experts.
Experts? All right. So we're going to put a bead on a hook, and there's a lot of different, some people like to take the hook, put it in their hand, put the bead on. If you look at the bead, you'll see that one side, the hole on one side is smaller and bigger on the other side. So the small hole goes over the point of your hook. So the way I'm going to do it, and also these are bead mats that John Schultz was going to make for everybody today, but he didn't, so. Anyway, so I put that down. That way if I drop my bead, which I will, it doesn't end up in the next county. So I just get the small hole and just drop it right over the tip. Yeah, they make some really cool bead pliers. Mike Bowers has some. I forgot mine, but
Michael's craft.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tie this, and then when we get done, you guys can tie one. So if you want to just watch, I'll just whip one up.
Jeez, you got eyes.
All right, so the reason this is a kind of an important fly to tie is because it teaches you thread control. And so everybody probably learned last week that thread is braided. And so the longer I wrap with it, the more I rope it up. And then if I counterclockwise spin my bobbin, it goes flat again. And so in this fly, we're going to try to keep our thread as flat as we can. So I'll show you what that looks like. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start my thread right behind my bead. I'm going to do a few wraps just to kind of create a little bit of a thread dam so my bead doesn't move. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap down the shank. I'm going to get one layer of thread on before I tie my wire in. So with my bobbin, if I spin it counterclockwise, my thread will flatten out, and I can do nice, even thread wraps. And you see I've got my waist piece pulled at a 45-degree angle. By doing that, it makes my thread wraps go in real nice and tight to the last wrap. So I've got a nice thread base now. All right, so now I'm going to tie in my wire. So I don't like tying any material to a bare hook. I like to get a layer of thread down first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my thread back up, because in order to create a body on this fly, I've got to have a few layers. So now I've basically got 2 layers of thread. I'm going to put the wire right into the back of the bead. I'm going to flatten my thread. I'm going to be very mindful of keeping your thread flat. Is anybody here tie left-handed? Besides you?
Anybody that matters.
That's what Joe.
So
Where you put the wire?
it doesn't. All right, so my wire's tied in, and now my thread is down at the bottom again. I'm going to flatten out. If you're tying with real heavy wire, you probably would maybe want to put it right down the middle of the back. With thinner wire, I don't think it matters, and I really don't think it matters to the fish. So, all right. So now here's what we're going to do. We need to create a taper. So right now you can see that my body of my fly is pretty uniform all the way up. So I'm going to flatten out my thread, and I'm going to come down 3/4 of the way. Okay, so right there. Keep my thread flat. I'm going to come all the way back to the top. Now I'm going to come down halfway. The thread got all fuzzy there. Come back up to the top. Now I'm going to come down a quarter. And then back to the top. So now you notice that I've got a tapered shaped body now, kind of carrot shaped. Okay, so now I need to wrap my wire. So normally, you know, when we wrap wire, we do it for two reasons. One is either to protect materials and give the fly strength, or in this case, it's just to create a rib. So if I've wrapped on, well, like on the next fly, we'll be using some pheasant tail. If I wrap my pheasant tail this way, I'm going to wrap my wire the other way so that they cross, and I give my fly some strength. On this fly, there's no way to give thread more strength, really, so I can go ahead and wrap my wire in the same direction as I wrap my thread. So the way I'm going to wrap my wire is I'm going to do a just what we call a palmered wrap or a barber pole. So I'm just going to bring it around. I'm going to space it out and bring it up to the top. Now I'll take my thread, tie my wire off, and I'm going to do a few wraps right up here behind it. So I've got my wire pulled forward, my thread going behind it. I've done 3, that's 4 wraps. And now I'm going to do a couple of wraps in front. And then I'm going to hold my bobbin tight and just helicopter my wire. You can use your scissors if you want. And if you do, use the very back of your scissors, but I like to do it that way. And then now I just need to whip finish. So I'll go ahead and take my tool. And that's a finished thread, zebra midge. Other things you could do to this, if you want, you could coat it with UV cement, which a lot of people do today. I don't know that that really matters, but that's a finished fly. So this fly can be tied in any color you can imagine. So we can tie them in black with red wire. We can tie them silver wire, gold wire, copper wire, green wire, and then we can tie the body in brown, olive, gray. I mean, there's no correct color pattern for this. So, all right, so that's that.
What about wire sizes for zebra midges?
Well, I used medium on this one. I like to have a little more pronounced rib, but you could use extra small, medium. It's up to you. So I like to have that rib pronounced a little bit more. So I used a little larger. So the next fly we're going to tie is another nymph. It's called a Hares here, but we're going to tie it a little bit different. So we have a size 12 hook, and again, this is a fly I would fish size 18, 20, 16. I mean, it's not a big fly, but we're going to tie it big just because it's a lot more fun. So I'm going to start my thread right here at about the 3/4 way point. Right about there, 2/3 point, I'm sorry. I'm going to bring my thread all the way to the back, just like I did my last one, keeping my waist piece off at a 45-degree angle. And that's keeping my wraps. I'm going to come right. So this is a barbless hook, but if that hook had a barb, my thread would be hanging right behind it right now. And that's kind of where I measure most of my flies. Although the next fly, we're going to go a little past that. All right, so I need to tie in some wire. So I'm going to use, gold and copper is definitely the preferred color on this fly. But that being said, you could get away with some other color. I'm going to bring my thread back up. And to tie my wire in on this thread, I'm just going to put it kind of at a 45-degree angle to my thread and my shaft. I'm going to get a couple of wraps around, and then I'm going to pull it. And then if I start wrapping a couple more, it gets a little harder to pull, but that way I don't pull it out. And this wire is going to be counter wrapped. Okay, so I'm going to bring it all the way to the back. So now my wire's tied in. I'm going to kind of pull it down out of the way. And now I'm going to put in my tail. So what we're using, this is pheasant. And there we go. On this fly, what I want to do is I want to use about 6 fibers. So the way to get pheasant, I mean, yours is already taken off, but here, let me get this in the camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it perpendicular to the stem. And I want to try to get right at, so that's 3, 4, 5. You know, you could go a couple of more. It's not that critical, but you know, when you're sitting down tying a lot of flies, if you do everything the same way, you'll get very uniform looking flies. 5. Okay, so that's 6 fibers. And if I pull them off perpendicular, then my tips even up. And then I'll just hold them right at the base and snatch them off. So now I have my clump of 6 pheasant tail fibers, and you notice on this end I've got that connective tissue from the stem. Let's go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so I'm going to tie a tail in here, and on a nymph, you know, next week we'll be doing dry flies, and we'll want our tail to be about the shaft length long, but on a nymph we don't want them nearly that long. So I can measure it. Okay, so that's a nice little tail length. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of tight wraps, but I'm not going to move. I'm just going to go one right over the other. And now my tail's tied in, and I'm going to take these butts and I'm just going to stand them straight up in the air. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use some rabbit dubbing. This is hare's ear dubbing. And with dubbing, more is less, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my thread down. I'm going to take just tiny bits and wrap them on. Okay, and I want to build up a body. I don't want this body to be too thick, though. I find that they fish better with slimmer bodies than thicker bodies. I'm just creating with tiny bits of dubbing. Don't try to put too much on at once. And just try to get an even noodle. Okay, so now I got my dubbing on my thread. I'm just going to take my finger, see if I can get it to slide, and just slide it straight forward and get it right up to my fly. And I'm going to pull this this pheasant tail back, and I'm going to start my wraps. And I want to build a little bit of a taper. I want a little bit of shape. Okay, so that's about the 2/3 point. So that's as far as I want my body to go. And then I'm going to take this pheasant tail, and I'm going to kind of flatten it out, pull it right over the top. I'm going to tie this down. Make sure that your pheasant tail comes straight over the top. I'm going to go ahead and wrap. I want to keep this right up on top of my hook shank and go ahead and wrap it forward. So now it's nicely secured. All right, so now on this fly, I do want to counter wrap because I want with the thread wraps, my wire's not going to disappear down into the thread bunch, but it will disappear down into dubbing. And I also want to put some strength on my pheasant. So I'm going to bring it over the other direction and palmer it up. And when you're counter wrapping, now when you tie it off, so my thread is actually pushing this wire the opposite direction to try to unwrap it. So I have to hold it pretty tight while I'm doing my wraps. And I'll do 3 or 4 behind, a couple in front, and now I can helicopter my wire off. So it's better to helicopter than to use your scissors, and if you're going to use scissors, borrow somebody else's. Not mine, but somebody else's. All right, so now this is going to become our thorax cover. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it back and just tie it in flat. I want my thorax to be about a third larger than my abdomen. So I've wrapped that pheasant tail back and forth. That creates a little bit of bulk. And now I'm going to finish the rest of it with just dubbing. So again, I'm going to take my thread and kind of pull it in front of me and just, if you don't want to slide your noodle up, you can turn, if you've got a rotary, well, none of these vices are rotary, are they? So never mind. So if anybody needs to buy a vise, the vise that Mike Bowers has down at the end of the table, we get a really good deal on those through the club. They're normally a couple of $100, $250, and we get them for like $160 or something like that. Wasn't that how much that cost?
With shipping, I paid you $157.
Okay. And then the vices that you have in front of you, we get for, I think, $50 for the one with the cam lock, and then the ones with the screw we get for like $40. So.
Or if you want a Nor Vice, come to David Rye and spin it up.
So really, when you get into fly tying, you really should just go out and buy the most expensive things, because you're going to end up having them anyway, and you'll save all that money buying the cheap stuff.
That's probably very true.
It is true. All right, so now I've got my dubbing noodle on. I'm going to do my first wrap right behind the eye. And there's two reasons for that. One, the main reason, though, is that I don't crowd my head, right? There's nothing worse than getting on the river and not being able to get your tippet through the eye of your hook. So if I do my first wrap there, I'm sure to not crowd that eye. Okay, and I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to bring it back down, and I'm going to end up, I'm going to do a couple of wraps right behind the eye to kind of clean it up. And now I'm going to bring this pheasant tail over. And I want it to be nice and flat, so just use your finger and kind of flatten it out. And I'm going to tie it down right behind the eye, 2 wraps. I'm going to stand it up and do a couple of wraps underneath. And then I'll go ahead and whip finish here. And I want to come in and cut this really short. Okay, and that's a finished pheasant tail. If you wanted, you could take your UV and go over, I mean, not pheasant tail, hares here. Take a little bit of UV cement, and you can go over your thorax cover a little bit. Give it a little bit of a shell back. I can use some UV on my thread wraps and make it tighter. You can also use just head cement. Whatever you like. And that's a hair. Oh, the other thing to do when you're finished, if you guys have a Velcro brush, which I'm pretty sure you do, I can come in underneath and really bug this thing up. And that's a good looking hare's ear nymph. What do you mean, well? is actually a Euro nymph, and it's usually we would do a pheasant tail right here, and I had more complaints years in a row about tying a pheasant tail than we did parachute Adams. So we decided to switch it up this year. And so if you notice the hook I gave you, you can see it's got a little bend right by the eye. So that's called a jig hook. And the bead that I gave you, if you look at it really close, it's got a hole on one side, and then on the other side, it's got a slot. So that slot is what it's going to take to get your bead past that little bend in the neck of the hook. So I put it on just the same way I did my other one. But when I slide it forward, go ahead and put this in the vise. When I slide it forward and rotate it, it'll come and sit right next to the eye, and that's what that slot's for. So when you tie on a jig hook, you need a slotted bead. So also I want to tell everybody, you guys will have a video of this class by this afternoon. So everything that we've learned today, you'll have it on video so you can watch it. And so I know it's a lot to remember. How did everybody find that last fly difficult, or not too bad?
Not bad.
Okay. This is actually even going to be easier than that fly. I'm going to use red thread, and so just like on our zebra nymph, I'm going to tie this in. You can see my bead is wobbling all over the place. I'm going to do wraps here until all of a sudden my bead stops moving, which will take a few wraps. There we go. Yeah, the little hole goes over the point, and then the slot comes behind. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do a thread base all the way down to the bottom. All right, so on this fly, normally we would stop right here, right where the barb is. Yeah. So on this fly, something that makes it fish even better is I'm going to take my red thread and I'm going to go around the bend a little bit, and then I'm going to do a couple of wraps right on top. I'm going to build up just a little bit of a red bump back here. So my fly is going to start from where my thread's hanging now, and that red bump is extended past, okay? And that's going to be just it's going to be what we call a hot spot. I'm going to bring my thread back up to the front. I'm going to tie in some wire. For this fly, I'm going to use red wire, but you can certainly use whatever you have left. And if anybody needs any wire, just let me know. I'm going to stick the wire right in the back of the bead. I'm going to tie it in. And I'm going to stop my thread wraps right there. Okay, so that's where I normally would have ended this fly anyway. I want that red hot spot to show off the back. Okay, now we're going to use a different material for our tail. So I passed around, this is a fancy Spanish chicken. It's called Coque de Leon, and some people will call it CDL. If you notice, it's got a really shiny, nice side with good markings, and then the back side is kind of pale. And if you also notice down at the bottom, the markings aren't real pronounced, and you can see the black rib in the middle is kind of wide, and then as you go up, it gets thinner and thinner. So these fibers up close to the top are more preferable for me. I take them off the same way I do the pheasant tail. So I want to take a clump here. I don't really have a number for you, but about that many is how many I'm going to take. And the same thing, I'm going to pull them perpendicular to the stem and just snatch them off and then grab them by the butts. And I've got a nice little clump of CDL. Okay, and I'm going to tie this in the same way. I'm going to bring it right back here where my thread's hanging. I'm going to put the butt ends at a 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to bring my thread over, 2 wraps, which brings it right up on top. And then I can grab the butts and I can pull. So I missed one butt there. I'll get rid of that. I'm going to pull it to a nice short little tail. So about right there. And these butt ends I didn't get a hold of, so I'll just cut these. Okay, now I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to flatten it out, I'm going to tie these butt ends in. So the way, when you're wrapping your butt ends up, the way to get them not to roll over your hook is to come over loose and then pull down. Loose, pull down, and that'll keep your butt ends right up on top of your hook shank. So if you go with lots of tension, you'll just roll them over to the other side. Okay, I'm going to bring it right up behind my bead. Clip those off. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use more pheasant tail. So pheasant comes, the last fly we tied in natural. This one's dyed muskrat gray, but you know, the pheasant tail comes dyed in all kinds of colors. So I'm going to take, for this one, I'm going to do the body. I'm going to use about, this is a fairly big fly, so I'm going to use 4 fibers. So I'll pull them off perpendicular, and that way my tips are lined up. And just snatch them off, cut off the gras-du on the end. So this fly on rivers is fished about what size?
14.
14. So this is a 14 here. So like John was saying earlier, you know, in a lake, I fish these flies up to a size 10, and they're pretty effective. All right, I'm going to take it, I'm going to square my tips up now so that they're all even. And then I'm just going to put the tips right up here. I'm going to trap them in. And then I'm going to hold my pheasant like at a 45-degree angle right up from the base of the hook and wrap back. It's probably how you guys did your marabou last week. And now it's tied in, it's right on top of the hook. Okay, and I'm going to bring my thread back forward. Go ahead and throw a half hitch and just get my bobbin out of the way so you guys can see. And now I just need to wrap my pheasant. Now I can wrap it counter wrap, I can wrap it regular way. I just have to do my wire the opposite way. And like I was saying before, with any material I counter wrap, when I go to tie it off, my thread is pushing it to unwrap it. So wire is much easier to counter wrap than pheasant is. So I think everybody has some hackle pliers in their pack. So for this fly, I like to use them. So what I do is I just bring the tips down, put them in my hackle plier, and then since nobody has rotary, I'll just wrap this the regular way. So right here, I'm going to do just about a 2/4 turn just to keep my pheasant tail together. And I want to do just nice wraps. Don't pull too hard because this stuff will break. And I'm just doing touching wraps coming forward. If your strands start to split apart, then just give it another little clockwise turn. And I'm going to bring it right up here to the back of the bead. Bring my thread over, and I want to wrap behind. Nice tight wraps. One in front, I'll do a couple more behind, and then bring in your scissors and cut this off flush. Okay, so now I need to counter wrap my wire. So I'm going to bring my wire up through, and I'm going to go, wait, I'm going the wrong direction there. Sorry about that. Oop, I lost a frond. I'll cut that off. So I'm going to bring my wire up. And I'll tie this off. Hold some tension on your wire so that you don't unwrap it. Okay, and hold your bobbin tight and helicopter. All right, so now this fly has, I've got a couple of fibers in there that are long. This fly has a collar, and so I'm going to pass around some shrimp pink dubbing. And shrimp pink is actually this color. It's actually orange. And I'm going to take off a tiny bit. So you see this little clump I have here? That's plenty to do this fly. Bring my thread down. And I'm just putting enough of this shrimp pink. Now this is ice dubbing, so it dubs on differently than the Hares here that you just used. Okay, so I have a short little dubbing noodle there. And then I'm going to just take my finger, I'm going to slide it right up to my fly. And then I'm going to cover a little space right behind my bead. And now I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to build a little red hot spot. So I'm just going to do just thread wraps. And I'm going to try to cover up that slot and give it just a little bit of a red hot spot. And then at this point, I'll go ahead and come in and whip finish. And I want my wraps to kind of move forward up that bead. So one of the things that makes this fly fish so well is it's got this red hot spot up here. And then by the way we tied it, we've got a red hot spot in the back as well. And that's a Frenchie. We do another version where we actually wrap a hackle right through that shrimp pink dubbing and put like a collar on it. But for this class, this is the Frenchie. The only thing that we did a little different is that red hot spot at the back. Other than that, that's a traditional Frenchie. So that's it.
Beautiful.
Nice.